Alrighty, well I was up last night reading the FEMA Gasifier instructions that they made back in 1989. Few random thoughts off the cuff. I don't know how easily available some of these things necessarily are, like high temperature hydraulic hose that you can cut down the side. Most hydraulic hose I know is actually steel braided, and you ain't going to cut it down the side of the bloody pocket knife. And also the use of high temperature silicone. You do a clean out every 15 hours and you're supposed to put more high temperature silicone on the threads of everything. That stuff is bloody expensive. It's like $30 a tube or something. I got some for somebody and also some for myself, and it is not cheap at all. Like, it's bloody expensive. You don't really want to be reopening the damn tube, the end nozzle always dries out with those corking guns, and to have to reopen it, get some more out, blah blah. Nah. There's a thing they got these days. They call it Teflon tape. Holy smoke, I get that for 50 cents a roll. Also funny how they don't recommend welding on the side of, a drum, potentially a 55 gallon, or as we call it here, 44 British gallon drum. You can't weld on that, you'll blow through that. But we want you to get a stainless steel mixing bowl and weld a U-bolt onto it. First of all, I think the mixing bowl is going to be a bit thinner than a 55 gallon drum. Secondarily, have fun welding a U-bolt straight onto stainless. I don't know how doable that is, although I do have normal steel welded onto stainless over there, but then it's a bloody mixing bowl. It's as thin as thin. You told us we can't weld a 55 gallon drum. It's like a lot of these government manuals. You may have seen other ones. There's another one that's floating around out there to do with improvised firearms, and I saw that many years ago, and a lot of these ones, they're just so bloody badly written in some senses, because you read some of this stuff and you just think that's not even practical, and other parts will be described in great detail, and then one thing you're supposed to do and it's just not even practical to do it. And yeah, that seems to be a bit the way with some of these expedient devices, FEMA equipment, stuff like that. Seems to be a little bit like that. Field expedient designs and everything. Yeah. Having said that though, the overall idea is pretty easy to follow. I can't understand how you go from a completely flat fire tube, like a completely flat bottom fuel hopper, at a 90-degree angle to your fire tube and expect the stuff to keep pouring through. It's going to build up in the sides. And that may be fine if the rest of the stuff slides past it, and I know it's not easy to weld a cone-shaped thing that's a larger size, but you get a bit of strap, you can work something out, Even if you jam a bit of sheet metal in there, because that's sort of where it goes from being hot to back to being cool inside your fuel hopper. Any of those of you who dealt with the Imbert design gasifier, more old crap, will know that. Still picking up bits of scrap metal. Always am. Any of you who have dealt with the Imbert gasifier, which is your standardised World War II one, invented by Frenchman Jacques Imbert. It's a little bit different. The FEMA one's a bit different. There is a requirement to keep it at least 1/3 full at all times, because your restriction that you have with your nozzles that's in amongst your combustion chamber, deep down, you don't have them nozzles, you fling them out, and your restricted airflow is restricted by drawing it through your feedstock. So your feedstock like basically your wood chips and your wood blocks or whatever, that is pretty much what restricts your airflow, as opposed to having nozzles. The stupid thing about it, as somebody's pointed out, is you get a perfectly placed combustion chamber when you got the Imbert style gasifier. Because of where your nozzles are placed and your small amount of oxygen comes in, that keeps your reaction zone, combustion zone, whatever you want to call it, in a set spot. Whereas with the FEMA one, the bastard can have a tendency to run a bit if you're not spot on. And I think that has something to do with why you might want to keep it more than 1/3 full, and it also may be something to do with the restricted airflow, incoming airflow for the reaction is also why you keep it more than 1/3 full. They all run on a pretty simple principle. You basically got a great big tube, and your tube exactly depends on, it's sort of like you can't just go grab one gasifier and just smack it on whatever the fuck else you want to put it on. You know, I can't put a gasifier on my car and then turn around and put it on my generator. It does not work like that. I'm sure some of these people who build fighter jets could build one that was adjustable like that without a problem in the world, but you'd really need to know what you're doing, because it's got to do with the size of your fire tube. Has to do exactly with the size of the engine you put it on. Some people may say it's horsepower. Realistically, it's actually the size of your engine, your displacement, your cubic inches, your litres capacity. On that note, don't always go for the literage or what it says on the badge of the car, because often you'll find there's, 2.5 litre vehicles can be, 2,590 cc, or they can be bloody 2,490, and you don't really know if you're going to get. They have this great tendency to mark something as 2.5 litres, and it's more like 2.4, or sometimes even more like 2.6, you know what I'm saying? In your manuals of your cars, it'll tell you the exact cc's of displacement, and probably your cubic inches. But I think with the cubic inches, when they write that in the States, it's pretty honest, because it's a lot more of a smaller thing than it would be to measure it in litres. And I know there's some that, they may be out by 1 or 2, but 1 or 2 cubic inches ain't much compared to half a litre, or 100 cc's or something like that. A lot of this, your size and your fire tube have got an exact relation to each other, and they have to have for the bloody thing to run properly. And basically, for all intents and purposes, you've got somewhere to hold the fuel, and with an Imbert one that has to be sealed. With a FEMA one, it doesn't have to be sealed. Shit, you can run it with the friggin' top off the damn thing. Although, if it starts raining, you've got to get a top on, because you can't afford any more than 20% moisture content in the wood. And basically, you'll have a place that holds your fuel, which goes down into a tube. And this tube, the width and the length, I don't think you've got a minimum length, but you don't really have a maximum length on that tube, but you do have a very specific width. It has to be the right width. And I think you can go a bit longer than the minimum length, and it won't hurt things. And this tube is basically sitting with the end of it believe it's 1¼ inches above a grate. This grate is basically a stainless steel mixing bowl with holes in it, or a colander, or something like that. And for the purpose of moving the ash through, this ain't got to be any good for stationary engines like generators sitting on the ground, water pumps sitting on the ground, but for vehicles it's quite good to have it hanging off chains, and the chains will sort of make the thing swing a little bit, and then it shakes all its ash through as a result. When you get the ash, apparently it's a sort of bit of a, it's ash, but it's also fine grindings of charcoal, and basically it'll go through the holes in that 125 half-inch holes in that stainless steel mixing bowl and fall down to the bottom. And on the bottom they have a bit of fireproof cement. They kept calling it hydraulic cement. I thought, what the hell is that? And I read between the lines, it's basically fireproof cement. It's like your fire brick stuff. And they put that on the bottom. And from there, you've got a little, well, pretty big 2-inch end cap or whatever that you can undo and scoop out all your ashes and shit when you go to start it again, because it's one of these things where you sort of run it, you shut it down, and you don't clean out straight away because you can't, because it continues to try and react, and it's got carbon monoxide, and it's recommended to keep it in the open air for at least 20 minutes and stay away from it for at least 20 minutes after you shut it down, to let it stop the reaction and cool down. But it'll try and continue the reaction. When it's running, all this stuff is under negative pressure. The only difference between the FEMA one and the Imbert style one is where you have your stainless steel mixing bowl meets your end of your pipe, that's where you've got your air nozzles coming in, whereas the FEMA one you don't have any at all, and you're just running on the air being sucked through all the wood chips from above, like I was saying before. They also have the ability to have a little shaker thing that you can shake back and forwards to shake that stainless steel mixing bowl on its chains. When I said it's not really good for for stationary engines like water pumps and generators, it just means it doesn't work on its own. You've got to grab hold of a little shaker and shake it for about 30 seconds every so often, hour or so, not very often. But a car, it just takes care of it by the motion of the car. And yeah, so it sort of is under negative pressure as it's running, this thing, because it's under a vacuum caused by the pistons. You know, the same vacuum that you get that draws in your fuel into your carburetor, you know, or brings it on the airstream via the Venturi effect. You know what the Venturi effect is. If you've read into gas stove operation or gas stove inner workings and enough about carburetors, you'll know what the Venturi effect is. It's where you can blast some air and it'll sort of draw other air along with it. And of course it can happen under a pressurized system such as the jets and Venturi holes, air intake holes in your propane stove, and it also happens under a vacuum situation with an engine. And that vacuum is what will draw the air in through the nozzles or through your feed hopper if you're talking about a FEMA style design, and that'll basically keep the reaction going and causes the system to be under a negative pressure. And you don't want any little air holes, because then your air mixture will be too weak for the engine to run. You've got to run about a 50-50 mix, half outside air and half wood gas. That's as it comes into your engine. So you like basically drive them with a choke about halfway or something like that, I believe. You know, or you can put on a ball valve and set that up, you know, for a long-term basis like that. Anyway, you can also have 1.1 to 1 ratio of air to gas, so you can have maybe like 55% air and 45% wood gas at times. But you got to keep in mind that this system is not some sort of a we're going to go to the drag races with this thing. Apparently it runs a bit like propane vehicles, like my car. A lot of people, it may not be that bad, but you know, your fuel mixture isn't the best to begin with, because it basically comes through about 20% carbon monoxide, 20% hydrogen, and 60% nitrogen, which is the outside air, is 75% nitrogen. So there's not much you can do about all that nitrogen. In the process of all this, it's a bit like biogas and all that. You know, biogas is, you know, you'll be 40 to 60%. I didn't know the exact amount. I think it's more like 40% methane, and 60% if you tweak it with the appropriate bacteria. With biogas, you know, and biogas ends up being, you know, 40 to 60% carbon dioxide, which then does nothing for you. You know, it's the same with this. You've got nitrogen coming in purely because you've got nitrogen as 75% of the outside air. And, you know, you're not running on a terribly great flame and mix, but it's enough to keep things going. But I can tell you, if it's as good as running a vehicle on propane, I can tell you firsthand about running a vehicle on propane. It's not that bad. A lot of people don't like it, and they say, oh, it's only 80% the power of petrol, and that is correct. That's true. But let me tell you, when I drive down the road normally, I can't tell the bloody difference. It's only when you're accelerating coming out the driveway, or when you're really pushing the vehicle, well, not really just accelerating out of the driveway, but when you're really trying to go flat out, accelerate hard out of blooming traffic lights or whatever, that's when you'll notice the difference with propane. If you're trying to pick it. If you're not trying to pick it, you get used to driving a vehicle on propane. I know, because I do and have for years, all the time. But when I really notice it is towing loads of scrap metal. If I tow a trailer with half a ton of scrap metal and I'm towing that on gasoline, on petrol, compared to propane, you can feel the difference. You can tell a difference. You just doesn't have the guts. You have got a lot less, you know, not tons less power, but you can feel it. You know, you definitely know that it's not as good as it could be. And, you know, I go up friggin' hills with half a ton of scrap metal on the back of a trailer with that thing run on propane, and it does it. But it'd do it better if you go on gasoline, you know what I'm saying? You can sort of, you feel that difference. We get to the top, and we get to the top at a reasonable enough rate, but you get there at a real good rate if you're going on petrol. And if that's what you got to face with a wood gasifier, well, that's what you got to face, because, you know, these aren't, people aren't going out of their way to get them, let's put it like that. You know, these are sort of emergency measure. These are sort of a up shit creek measure. These are sort of a, well, it's going to have to do sort of a measure. And, yeah, very interesting. Bang out a few facts. I used to say that Sweden had 80% or 95% vehicles in World War II run on gasified. No. They had 40% vehicles running on gasifiers in World War II, but occupied Denmark, Nazi-occupied Denmark, I believe, Denmark had 95% of vehicles running on gasifiers, right through to fishing boats and ferries, boat ferries, from one side of a bay to the other or whatever, from one destination to the other via water. If you live in Sydney, you'll know about ferries, I'm sure. Yeah, quite intriguing. I mean, they went bonkers on it. They had stationary equipment, so, you know, like flour mills and you know, chaff cutters and other stationary farming equipment, you know, right the way through to fishing boats and stuff like that. They just like, that was like the only damn option, because they basically cut off the oil supply to civilians. Just pretty much that was it. The only remaining 5% may have been the emergency services or something like that, I don't know. But yeah, it was pretty rough in Denmark, and in Sweden, yeah, 40% of vehicles, and in fact the industry popped up overnight to be able to cut wood to the right size, because with these FEMA gasifiers you can go from sort of wood chips that are, what is it, 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch by about 1/4 inch thick, right through to 2-inch square blocks. And a lot of the Imbert gasifiers just require pretty much 2-inch Imbert, 2-inch wooden blocks for the Imbert gasifiers. That's what I'm reading off the FEMA thing. I wouldn't be surprised if you could throw in 1-inch blocks or something like that anyway. But overnight in Sweden, these industries stood up that makes, you know, that made wood pre-cut to a size ready to use in the gasifier straight away. And that was something where, you know, somebody just start this thing as long as they had a wood saw and a blooming axe or whatever, and bingo, it was a, you know, little industry popped up just at the drop of a hat. There's also moisture content. It isn't that bad, really. You have to run it at no more than 20% moisture content in the wood. Green wood is 25 to 60%, and air-dried wood is 12 to 15%, and kiln-dried wood is only 8%. But anyway, so long as you get it below 20% before you shove it in the gasifier, you'll be right. And if not, there'll just be so much friggin' steam and shit, and it'll just, I think it has trouble maintaining the temperature high enough and whatnot. And fuel just comes to a grinding halt. But yeah, interesting looking into all this. Bit of a stuff around to build a Imbert one. They do run a lot better. As for the filters in them, they suggest, I thought it was an underwater bubbler like a friggin' bong or something, but apparently they force the gas to run along the surface of the water inside a tin laying side on. So it's not laying upright, it's laying side on. And you'll have like a sheet metal V, and you'll have your pipe come in. And what that does is apparently draws through a bit of the ash that would go through your stainless steel mixing bowl down to the bottom. A bit of that crap gets drawn in to the system. Oh, I should mention that they've got, while you go from your feed hopper then into a skinnier amount and like a skinnier tube, and then go down before you get to your grate or your stainless steel mixing bowl with holes in it, or your colander. That's because the gases that go out, they don't draw them out the bottom, they draw them out right at the top, right where it goes from a fuel hopper into a fire tube and it goes skinny. They draw them out there. And the idea is that the gases are hot and they will heat up the wood in that fire tube, because you want the wood not to go in cold. I mean, it goes in cold in the fuel hopper, but as it gets closer to the reaction zone, you want the wood to get hotter and hotter. So they use the gas coming from the reaction zone to heat that fire tube, and it's as simple as, I'll draw this on a bit of dust here. Fuel hoppers like that, right? Then that's your fire tube there, and your grates there, and then your rest of it goes like this. and you have a little hole there to get your ash out of the bottom, but your outlet for your gas will be there. Now in that, your warm gas has gone up past the fire tube and heated all the wood inside the fire tube. After that, you go through your little water one, and then you want to basically cool it so you can go through a radiator, and then you basically go through, once it's cool, you go through like basically a car air filter. Now they do away with all this and just put it through basically a 5-gallon drum full of wood chips with a flat divider that sort of sits straight through the middle. They can do that. I'll do it properly. I'll be putting it through a blooming drum with water in it, because a lot of the creosote gets caught up in that drum with water, and you know, I'll be stuffed black and blue if I'm not going to make it clean enough, and I'll make it probably far cleaner than it needs to be. You don't want your pipes too thin or with too many right angle bends, because you don't want to restrict your flow. It's a bit like water in the way that if you go through too many U-bends or too many sharp corners or go back to too thin a pipe, it restricts the flow. And in essence, you try and keep that as good as you can. There's a trick around this that you can make it better. And it's pretty easy. You make the pipe double the bloody size it needs to be. And same goes for your filters. If they say have a filter with a drum this size, and that will be good enough, do one bigger, and then there's less restriction on the airflow. Don't do any U-bends in it, do curved bends, like extractors on an exhaust. You guys will know what those are, especially if you've played with, you know, cars quite a bit, as opposed to the cast manifold, which has got some real obvious bends in it. You have smoother pipes coming off as a length with slight curves as opposed to 90-degree bends, and then it helps your exhaust get out of your vehicle better. Same sort of a concept, but we're dealing with the intake side in this case. And yeah, so if you obviously have, you know, a bigger radiator or a large pipe, you know, or I know large pipes don't go well because of the diffusion effect with that you get when you're cooling things. Having been in the radiator industry, I know that you're better with 4 small pipes as opposed to 1 big pipe, because the smaller pipes will dissipate the heat easier than the big pipe will, purely because of it's like the ice blocks concept, where you got an IBC sized lump of ice compared to thousands of ice blocks the same size. Those thousands of ice blocks will melt a lot quicker than the one big solid block because of them being smaller. Same sort of a concept, but yeah, instead of having a big pipe, you have multiple small ones and you still get your cooling effect. Or instead of having what they have is a car radiator, and you're supposed to put it through, you know, some sort of a car radiator or intercooler or something like that. Don't go for the smaller kind, go for the biggest one you can get, and then, you know, you're going to have less restriction of the flow and whatnot like that. It means you're going to have to run the blower longer, because you've got to start these things on a blower, which acts as a vacuum when it's initially starting, which makes up for the vacuum of the pistons when it's running. And the vacuum of the pistons will draw it all in and cause the reaction when it's running, but as you try and start it, you've got to use a blower, like a little electric fan blower. And the bigger your system, the bigger, you know, that's going to, the longer that's going to take for it to suck it through from, you know, the gasifier to your actual engine manifold. Anyway, the other stunt to do a few of these things better, if you can't afford all that length, or it doesn't seem to be running too well when you accelerate, there's a bit of a delay or whatever, the other way is to have a more efficient one, which means you don't cool it through steel pipes, you cool it through aluminium pipes, or better still, copper pipes. because they have a higher conductivity than steel, they will cool things a lot quicker, which is why radiators, the good ones are made out of copper, the cheaper ones are made of aluminium, and basically nobody except a couple of air conditioning condenser makers make it out of steel. And yeah, so it may, you know, mean that instead of having a larger pipe or a lot longer, you may need to go for more efficient cooling methods by using aluminium and copper instead of steel, or something like that. But anyway, yeah, it's just a little blurb on FEMA gasifiers and the differences between the Imbert ones and the FEMA ones. And yeah, at some point I wouldn't put it out of the question that I might try and make one and put it on that old bloomin' green Nissan. Because the plans I've got here are for more those sort of engines, not your little generator 5 horsepower single cylinder engines. On that note, a lot of those ones, I believe they don't use 2-inch blocks, obviously. I believe they use pellets. How the hell are you going to get pellets? Quick answer: box thorn jammed into a mulcher, and there's your pellets. And as for drying, box thorn's actually bloody good at drying. It's a lot better at drying than most woods. Quite surprisingly so. I've had it dry from being cut down to having cracks all through it, and literally in about 2 months. You know, it's brilliant stuff when it comes to drying out. But anyway, I'm going to go have breakfast, and yeah,